Well, hello there. Welcome back. We are now on episode 3 of the War, Sports, Politics, and Dragons podcast. Hope everybody listening is having a great day. I am Dave, Emperor of the Nerds, and I will be hosting. Thank you again for tuning in. Before we get going, though, I've got a pretty important update. We have an Instagram account now. It is at the WSPD Pod. Check me out on there. We're going to have some nature pics coming up. I'm going to be going on a ride out the country where I live and taking some shots. They're going to be beautiful because we've got some really nice scenery out here. So check that out coming up soon. Again, we're still getting a lot of stuff off the ground. I'm just trying to get the accounts created and get the footprint out there so that we can start, drawing in followers, bringing in interest to spread the word. I got another important update. This podcast is now also available on Amazon Music and on Audible in addition to Spotify. We're working on getting it on the other ones as well, like iHeartRadio. I think we're on there now too, but I'm not sure about that one. But we are already growing. Spread the word. Help me increase my numbers so I can qualify for a sponsor. That would be lovely because we desperately need some tech upgrades so that we can do a better job with the podcast and we can make a video version as well. Starting out, we're going to go ahead and go with politics/world news. Great Britain's government has scrapped plans for a digital ID that was announced back in September by horribly unpopular left-wing UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, that in order to work in Great Britain, you would have to have a digital ID. It has been scaled back drastically after a huge public outcry. The plan was supposedly to cut immigration, but let's be honest, guys, it's really just something more along the lines of the mark of the beast out of the book of Revelations. It's just a way for the already increasingly repressive and censorious government of the United Kingdom, once a great nation, now turning into a third world Islamist hellhole to control people. Vladimir Putin, at a recent meeting which involved, I believe, the UK Minister of Defense, when asked about his concerns about facing British troops in the war in Ukraine, because there is talk of NATO countries deploying troops there to help back up comedian/unlawful president serving beyond his term, dictator Volodymyr Zelensky. He was asked what he thought about the British being involved, and he said he wasn't worried about the British military. The British can't even stop rubber boats coming into their country from France with illegal immigrants on them, and they're too worried about their children being raped by Pakistanis. So Putin's a scumbag. Don't get me wrong, okay? The only person I dislike less in Eastern Europe than Zelensky is Putin, because they're both corrupt, they're both evil men, and it's just one of them has done a better job of being a grifter. Okay? The former comedian Zelensky is, by the way, and these are facts, I do not deal in hyperbole, he has now, for well over a year, I want to say he's pushing 2 years, served beyond his legal term as president. He suspended elections. He has banned all opposition political parties. Vladimir Zelensky has also nationalized all news media, so all news media now has to toe the line of whatever the Ukrainian government says. Imagine if Trump tried to nationalize the news media. There wouldn't be enough clutch and pearls available for people on the left in particular, and a lot of people on the right, because it's a horrible idea to purchase and hold on to. That would be absurd. But Zelensky has done it, all while maintaining the facade of being this massive pro-democracy leader. No, he's just another corrupt dictator. Also, he has had American journalists killed. So don't ever preach to me about how Ukraine is a bastion of freedom. Ukraine is only slightly more free than Russia, and that's not really saying a whole lot. But anyway, Britain has scrapped the plans for digital ID, scaled it back a lot, and they're still going to require some form of a digital identification or background check in order for someone to find employment in the UK, but it's not going to be quite as severe as it was. Yesterday in the podcast, I was talking about Australia. being a surveillance state. Malaysia is doing something similar to Australia in terms of social media censorship. And again, I don't really like social media, but I like censorship even less. Okay? The First Amendment here is thankfully very strong. As Dennis Miller once said, when you have a healthy First Amendment, you end up with people like David Duke. But when you don't have a healthy First Amendment, you wind up with people like Adolf Hitler. So I'm happy with my First Amendment and not having government with significant say and control over what I say and do. Remember, in Britain, there have been over, I think, 2,000 people arrested for social media posts. They said the wrong thing on Twitter, basically, and the government clapped them in irons and put them in a cage. That's not a free country. Think about that. In other news, yesterday, President Trump announced that as of February 1st, he was going to be cutting off payments of federal funds to sanctuary states which have sanctuary cities, claiming that they are basically the root of a lot of the crime due to illegal immigration. There's been a bit of an outcry due to that. But, you know what? American tax dollars should not go to non-Americans here who are basically sucking off the government teat. It doesn't work that way. I am in favor of that, but we'll see what happens in court. Everything gets litigated nowadays, so I'm sure that there will be a federal judge to issue an injunction in 3, 2, 1. Next topic. Florida, a legislator has proposed a 50% sin tax on income derived from having an OnlyFans account. For those of you who don't know what OnlyFans is, I know what it is, but I don't see the point of it. OnlyFans is it's porn, okay, and mostly women get on OnlyFans and set up an account and basically show off their backsides and their genitals for $5.99 a month, give or take. Okay, so if you want to see me naked, if you want to see me having sex with 14 different guys, basically they say, sign up to my OnlyFans and pay me money, because being a prostitute is much easier than actual work, apparently. So this Florida legislator has proposed a 50% tax on any income that the OnlyFans prostitutes, and there are male prostitutes on there as well. I've been thinking of going on there myself and calling it probably No Fans. That would be the name of my account. If I went on there, I'd probably just show pictures of my feet. Oh, I gotta cut my toenails. Anyway, that's where we are in Florida right now, and I can safely say I'm kind of in favor of that. I've never been pro-prostitution. That's a pretty easy stance to take, and anyone that argues that prostitution is a victimless crime, quite honestly, is a moron. Prostitutes end up getting horribly treated. The paid sex industry is a den of violence and drug use and murder and all manner of depravity. It's not a good thing, and not to mention it destroys marriages, it ruins families, and it's very detrimental to the lives of mostly 95% of the people whose lives are harmed in the so-called sex trade are women. And it's a sad commentary that we even have such a thing as OnlyFans existing, but there's so much porn on the internet. You really can't do an internet search for much of anything without somehow, some way, some porn link popping up way down. If you keep scrolling, you'll eventually find a porn link. No matter what you're looking for, you could search for duckies and bunnies and breakfast cereal, and you'll find something perverted in the search results if you scroll down far enough. So anyway, that's where we stand in Florida with the news regarding a new legislative bill. I'm sure that'll help Florida fix whatever budget concerns they may have. Everybody believes that. Stand on your head. On to war. In this case, kind of a potential civil war brewing, but there's also talk that it's run its course. The unrest in Iran, which is now in its 18th day, it's estimated that yesterday in the capital, over 1 million people gathered to protest the Islamist State under Khamenei, and the members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Council, I think that's what the IRGC stands for, were opening fire and killing protesters, and multiple thousands of protesters, pro-democracy, anti-Islamism, pro-freedom protesters have been murdered by the Iranian regime. Trump has mentioned the possibility of intervening. What I'm hearing from military experts and the talking heads in the various news media sources is that the U.S. is most likely not going to put boots on the ground in Iran. That would absolutely become a quagmire. Think of basically what Iraq was like, only in a nation about three and a half times as large, and with, of course, a slightly higher population. But that said, there will probably still be your special op forces doing things, and there will be psyops, and there will be political agitation and subversion attempts, and the typical black bag undercover stuff that so many world governments do, and that America does in almost every country in the world, in an attempt to depose that Islamo-fascist regime. But we'll see what develops from there. I know that the internet had been down for quite some time. The Iranian government had basically shut down the internet in that country, as well as the phone lines. I did hear that yesterday the phones were working again and people were able to call out of the country and talk to family members and so on who lived abroad. I know that when my wife worked at one job she had back from when we first got married until around 2019, she had a coworker who claimed to be from Persia, because if you said Iran, people acted strangely, so she simply said she was Persian. And of course, it's not been called Persia since like the 7th century AD, but that's where she said she was. She was a very sweet lady, and I kind of miss talking to Fariba, actually. But now we've also seen a lot of footage of women in Iran breaking the law, and this is, by the way, a law that carries with it the death penalty, possibly, for violating it. Women are removing their hijabs, their head coverings, in public and walking around bareheaded. It sounds so incredibly medieval to folks like you and me in a much more progressive, although, to be honest, compared to Europe, we're still rather puritanical in our moral standards, country. Just to see that they require women to cover their heads, and in some countries they require them to cover their faces as well and wear burqas. It's wild. It's really wild. But there are people that right now are basically out there facing armed troops who are actively shooting and attempting to kill them. And they're basically saying we would rather die than live the way we're living. And where is the American left on all this? They're standing up at the Golden Globes shouting obscenities about the President of the United States. And they're protesting Immigration and Customs Enforcement removing criminals from the country in Minnesota. They have gotten rid of their Palestinian flags in their little online social media bios and replaced them with a Venezuelan flag, because a narco-terrorist dictator communist in a South American country is much more worth their concerns and efforts and paid protests than the actual cause of literal freedom in the Middle East. So as long as the Democratic Party is the party of insanity, they're going to struggle to win presidential elections, I think. I think that the House races in 2026, the midterms, are going to be a lot closer than people think, in terms of, oh, the Democrats are going to sweep and take the House, they're going to gain 35 seats or whatever. I don't see that happening, because people are absolutely tired of the way the left has behaved. They are basically a party of terrorists now. That's all they do, is threaten and lie and cry. You don't see actual policy from them. all you see is threats and stupid rhetoric, out-and-out lies, and violence. And you can't sustain a political movement when everyone around you thinks you've lost your frickin' mind. So we'll see how that goes. In news similar to that, at a Ford factory, I believe in Michigan yesterday, President Trump was seen mouthing the words F you at least twice and flipping the finger. He gave the bird to an auto worker at the plant who yelled at him and called him a pedophile protector. And his response was basically F you and flipped him the bird. That is going to be the picture that I post as the AV for this podcast when this is all said and done. Because quite honestly, people have had it with the lunacy. They really have. The polls are showing that Trump's numbers are actually getting slightly better as the weeks go on because people are sick and tired of being told that all men are evil, they don't know what a woman is, illegal immigrants are great people, fraud at Somali daycare is perfectly acceptable, narco-terrorists are great guys that we should back and we shouldn't do anything with them, and that Islamofascism is the way to go in the Middle East. That's why they supported Hamas and the whole alleged Free Palestine movement. If Palestine became its own state, it would become a slave state run by Hamas, probably with help from Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations, because that's who's running the Islamist-controlled areas now. It's not like they're going to sweep in on a big float marked democracy and things are going to be wonderful and peachy keen and everybody's going to have a job. It's going to be a dump. It's, well, not a dump, but because, they have modern buildings and so on and so forth. But it's going to be a third world cesspool with incredibly high unemployment. People complain here about 6 or 8% unemployment. Unemployment in areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority, for instance, in the 1990s, ran as high as, I believe, 75%. 75% unemployment. Imagine if it's just 25% unemployment and 1 out of 4 working age people doesn't have a job. What do you think that would do to the infrastructure of America? You think you're having trouble at a department store finding a cashier now? You think you're having trouble getting somebody to take a register at the Food Lion now to ring up your grocery purchase? Imagine if unemployment was 5-6 times as high as it is now, and if everything was run basically as a police state. People can piss and moan and spout their rhetoric all they want about how Trump's a dictator, but I got to level with you. He's a pretty crappy dictator because people are pretty much saying and doing whatever they darn well please, up to the point where they're assaulting law enforcement officers, and by and large, many of them are getting away with it. Granted, there was one woman who decided to try to run over an ICE agent that we've seen on video who got shot up in Minnesota, but that's just a case of FAFO. She found out. You don't do that. Okay? You don't attack law enforcement. That's not a difficult equation. You don't need a slide rule or an app to figure that out. Don't attack law enforcement and you won't get shot. Okay? Don't bring your car to a gunfight. That's all there is to it. That's where I stand on that. If you have a problem with it, turn this podcast off and go cry. I don't care. Okay? That's the way it be. Shifting gears now, we're going into the world of dragons, nerdy stuff, role-playing news. In this case, it's the comic book world. Rare comic book once stolen from Nicolas Cage sells for $15 million. Okay? I've read this on multiple sites. And before I even read the article, I knew which particular comic it was. I didn't know that it had been stolen from Nicolas Coppola, by the way, which is the real name of Nicolas Cage. He is the son, I believe the son or nephew of famed director Francis Ford Coppola, of course, Godfather fame and a number of other movies. But I can tell you right now, it was Action Comics, the very first issue number 1, from back in the spring, I want to say, of 1938, back in the golden age, as they call it, of comic books. Nicolas Cage had bought a very good condition copy of Action Comics number 1 for $150,000 in 1996. Now, that's That's a pretty penny to pay for a comic book you're basically not going to read because it was slabbed. And what slabbed means is it's in a protective plastic case and it's sealed and airtight to try to maintain the integrity of it, because the wood pulp in the comic book pages themselves has certain acids in it that will cause the paper to deteriorate over time. It's simply the nature of the beast. It's just what the comic book was made of. The paper has acids in it, and it'll eventually rot away. So Action Comics #1 was stolen from him in 2001. It was recovered in 2011 by a man in California who bought a storage locker and found it inside the storage locker. Word has it, from what I've read, that the stolen comic actually was kept under the bed of the thief who took it for 2 years during its time missing from Nicolas Cage's possession. But in 2011, it was returned to Nicolas Cage, and in 2015, he sold it for, I think the article I read, I think it was Comic Book News, said that he sold it in 2015 for $1.5 million. So a source that they spoke to said that the theft of the comic actually increased its value because it created a lot of buzz and made it more, made there more demand for the comic. I can remember in the 80s that it was worth, I don't know, $10,000 or $20,000. It was worth a significant amount of money back even in the 1980s. And had I had the money, I would have done it back then, but there's no way on earth I would spend $15 million for a comic book. Not now, even if I had it. I just wouldn't. I don't consider it a wise investment. There are reported to be around 100 copies of Action Comics #1 left in existence out of a print run of probably 100,000. But I can tell you where most of those comics went to die. In 1938 was when the comic came out. And then on December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. And the next thing you know, America is involved in a war. Now, Superman had his own comic at that point and also appeared regularly in Action Comics. But what happened after World War II began was the drives began. Scrap metal drives, clothing drives, food drives, and scrap paper drives. And what people would do is go around collecting, give us your scrap metal, we'll build battleships out of this scrap metal, and we'll kill the Japanese and win the war. Give us your food, we'll feed the troops, and we'll kill the Germans, and we'll win the war. Give us your clothing, and we'll remake the stuff into uniforms for our troops, and we'll kill the Italians and everybody else, and we'll help win the war. And give us your scrap paper and stuff you're not using anymore, and we'll use that to print important paperwork so that we can win the war. And a lot of comic books, kids and their parents, probably a lot of them were coerced by their parents, donated to these used paper drives, and the comics got pulped and turned into something else. And that's where a lot of them went. So that's got a significant thing. It's got a lot to do with where all those comics wound up. But long and the short of it, $15 million. Now, from what I understand, the comic is on the grading scale of 1 to 10. The comic is rated as a 9.0, which is about as mint condition as you're going to find for a comic that is now 88 almost years old. So that's impressive that anyone would even have one in that good a condition. I remember hearing a story of someone that put one in aluminum foil and wrapped it up and put it in a freezer and kept it in a freezer for decades and pulled it out thinking that it would be worth something. Of course, I don't know if that story's true, but if it was, then they made a wise decision and, they probably profited fairly well off of that. Heading over to sports news, as I was taping the podcast yesterday, two big announcements from Pennsylvania came through. One was from the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles head coach has replaced his offensive coordinator on the day or two after their team's playoff elimination at the hands of the San Francisco 49ers. So you're going to see a new OC with the Philadelphia Eagles next year. And Mike Tomlin, whom I speculated about whether or not he would stay on, whether he would retire, whether he would be forced down, what the situation would be with the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers, 6 minutes before the Eagles, issued an announcement, a statement from Mike Tomlin saying that he was stepping down after 19 years as the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I personally am not a Mike Tomlin fan. He always kind of struck me as arrogant. But that said, I've said for years, one of my mottos is, if you're going to be arrogant, you've got to be good at something first. And to be honest, he was a good head coach. He coached the Steelers for 19 straight years, as I said yesterday. Every single year they had a winning season. But having a long playoff drought where they make the playoffs and get knocked out in their first game, which happened at least 6 times in a row. They're 0 for their last 7. That 7th playoff game at the beginning of that streak chronologically, I don't know if they had won a playoff game that year before being knocked out in the one that started the 7-game losing streak. But I'll just say that at least 6 times in a row, they were one and done in the NFL playoffs. And again, Tomlin is the first Steelers coach to go 9 years without winning a playoff game. Of course, you're following in the steps of Chuck Noll, who won 4 Super Bowls in the 70s and into 1980. And then after him, down the road came Bill Cowher, who won a Super Bowl. Now, Mike Tomlin, of course, coached the Steelers to a Super Bowl win as well. So we'll see where he winds up. He referred to it as that chapter in his life. So we'll see what the new chapter is. If I had to guess, I would say he's going to be a commentator. But I've been known to be wrong. We'll see where he winds up. And today's podcast is not going to be over an hour like yesterday's was. It's probably going to be just a little over half an hour. What we're going to do next is my installment of anecdotal evidence is coming up. You ready? This one is entitled The Drunk at Doc's Quick Shop, 1987. So hearken back with me to the second term of the Ronald Reagan administration. It is the summer. It is around June-ish, I want to say, June or so, of 1987, and I have a part-time job between my junior and senior years of high school, working at Doc's Quick Shop, which was a little Shell station. It was a local chain here on Maryland's Eastern Shore. They had 7 or 8 locations. They had one. The one I worked at was outside of Cambridge, off of westbound US Route 50. They had one in Trapp, Maryland, 8 or 10 miles up the road along westbound 50. They had a couple in the town of Easton, Maryland, a little farther north. They had one in, I believe, Preston, Maryland, and a couple of other places. And at one point, they were a local thing, but crappy management, which I experienced as an employee, and changing times ended up resulting in the downfall of that little chain of stores. And considering how I was treated in my final days when I worked there, good. You're the manager that I worked under crapped all over me. I was a 16-year-old kid just trying to make some part-time money, and he treated me like dirt. So anyway, this is a fun story, though. It's a Saturday, so it's a beach weekend on Maryland's Eastern Shore at a convenience store that is literally right off of US Route 50 westbound. Where the road net is here on Maryland's Eastern Shore, once you get to the Queenstown outlets headed east on US Route 50 from across the Chesapeake Bay. You come across the Bay Bridge, you go into Queen Anne's County, you start on Kent Island, you run through Stevensville and then Chester on Kent Island, you go across the Kent Narrows Bridge, and then you are in Graysonville. Graysonville will then take you to Queenstown where the outlet stores are, and when you make that sweeping right-hand turn up a hill and around a bend to get there, the road net stops being an interstate type system, and it is simply a divided highway that allows you to cross the highway directly instead of needing an exit. A little further up from Queenstown is the town of Y Mills, which is the location of a small junior college called Chesapeake College. There are two stoplights there. There's one at the college itself, and then a mile and a half farther up Route 50 to the east is a light at the junction of U.S. Route 50 and Route 404, which heading east will take you into Delaware eventually toward beach resorts there, such as Rehoboth and Bethany Beach. You go farther down Route 50 eastbound from Y Mills, and you go into Easton, which is the capital of Talbot County. Then you go another 7 or 8 miles, and you are in the little town of Trappe, Trappe, which is a little one stoplight burg that has a population of maybe 2,000 people. And then you go another 7 miles, cross another large bridge across the Choptank River. You're in Cambridge. Get through Cambridge and go a couple more miles. And on the left, as you're headed east on 50, off of the westbound lanes, you could pull off of the 50 directly into the parking lot, was Doc's Quick Shop. It's no longer there, as I said. The fuel pumps got taken out. The place got renovated a number of years ago, and it is now a coffee joint. It's called Rise Up Coffee. I don't drink coffee myself. I prefer my caffeine cold. I drink Coke. I'm a Coke and Dr. Pepper guy. So I don't drink coffee. I never liked the taste of it. But I have a story about something I did involving coffee with my dad when I was a kid, which some of you may have heard about and done yourselves, but it's another story for a different podcast. So anyway, the scene is set. You know where we are now. We're a little over an hour west of Ocean City, Maryland. We still got to drive almost 40 minutes to get to Salisbury. At this point, you had to drive straight through Salisbury on US 50 to get to Ocean City, which was another 25 or so miles east of Salisbury. In between Cambridge and Salisbury is the little town of Vienna, which had a very narrow 2-lane bridge. And the road net gets very primitive as you headed into Vienna at that point. They built a bypass around Vienna in 1989. And then in the 90s, they built a bypass around Salisbury as well to help facilitate beach traffic. But at this point, none of that's been built. It's 2 lanes headed east, 2 lanes headed west, right next to the parking lot of Doc's Quick Shop. I'm outside sweeping around the entrance of the store. I finish, I walk in. As I walk in, you know how convenience stores have the little bell on the door. When you open the door, it rings so that the clerk knows somebody has come into the store. I hear it ding as I open the door, and I walk towards the counter to put my broom and dustpan away. As I do, I hear the doorbell ding again. Turn around. As a dude, he's about 5'8", might weigh 160, white guy in his 20s. And I can tell, and I'm not the most worldly kid at the age of 16, but this guy's drunk, man. He's drunk. He's loaded, okay? He's really hammered, and I'm just hoping that he's not driving a car. Turns out he is, because the friend riding with him, which he tells me a minute later, is actually drunker than him and can't even stand up to walk because he told his friend to come in. Here's how it all breaks down. Ding, ding, I walk in, walk towards the counter. Mark Foster was my coworker, really great guy. I think he went on to become an aircraft mechanic and just a salt-of-the-earth type guy, real easygoing, very friendly. He was like an older brother to me when I worked there. He had been there several years. He's the only person I ever knew that worked at that Quick Shop that actually had been there long enough to qualify for a vacation. He actually got a paid vacation there 1 year of 1 week because he had been there for like 6 years. I mean, he paid his dues, he put in the time, and he was a dedicated, good employee and just a generally decent guy. Mark's running the register. I'm stocking shelves and helping out because at 16, I wasn't old enough to sell beer. So they were leery of letting me run the register and couldn't leave me to run a shift by myself because I couldn't legally sell beer. And if I did, they'd get in all kinds of trouble and I'd get fired and people would get fined and so on and so forth. So I'm working with Mark. Ding, ding, I walk in. 3 seconds later, ding, ding, ka-thump. I turn around. This dude has fallen in the floor, on the floor mat, as you come in the door to the store. He gets up, runs a hand through his tousled brown hair, and looks to the right And if you look to the right when you walked in the store at that point, it was just an aisle that led to the soda coolers 25 feet away. And then he looks to the left in this exaggerated motion and sees Mark standing there at the register, and Mark says, "Hey, how are you?" Man. Oh, God, I am so fucked up. Sorry to use that language, but that's what the guy said. Mark's like, "Yeah, looks like it. Where you headed?" "I'm trying to get to the beach, man, and my friend is too drunk to walk in here, so I had to come in." How do you get to Ocean City, man? Well, okay, let me put it to you this way. You have to be drunk or an absolute moron to not be able to find your way to Ocean City if you're on US Route 50 outside of Cambridge, Maryland. You would have to be making a conscious effort, or be the stupidest person alive, or be very inebriated, and in this case it was option C, for this guy to pull off of eastbound 50, which was taking him literally to the beach, to pull into this quick shop and ask for directions to the beach. Well, Mark looks at me, and I put up my hand to Mark and give him a gesture like, "I've got this." So I walk over to him. I'm like, "Hey, man, you okay? You need a soda or something? You need something to settle your nerves?" "Yeah, I think I'll get a soda." So he goes and pours himself a fountain Coke. Somehow manages to fish out his wallet, pays for the fountain Coke, leaves the change on the counter. "So, which way do I go to get to Ocean City, man?" I'm like, "Okay, it's real simple. You actually came off the road that takes you there." Oh, okay. So which way do I go?" I'm thinking, my God, how could he not realize this? So I'm like, okay, look, it's so incredibly easy. Here's what you're going to do. Get out, pull out of the parking lot right over here, and I point to where the parking lot meets Route 50. Make a right-hand turn. You're going to go about 4 or 5 miles, and you're going to go across a bridge. At this point, a new bridge had been built across the Choptank River to replace the old 2-lane bridge. Now it was a 2-lane each-way divided highway bridge. Maryland Governor William Donald Schaefer had put together a program called Reach the Beach back in the late 70s, early 80s that involved improving the road net on the Eastern Shore, because at one point US Route 50 was a 2-lane road, 1 lane going each way from Kent Island all the way to Ocean City. So it got expanded to a dual highway, and that bridge was not helpful because it was still a 2-lane bridge that had been built in 1935, okay? And Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 32nd President of the United States, was president at the time. He actually drove across the bridge to inaugurate its opening when they opened that bridge in 1935. It's since been closed off. It had been used for decades after officially closing. They took out the center span so to let big ships get through, but they left it open, state authorities did, to use as a fishing pier. And a lot of people would go on there and fish. And I, a couple times, went there with some friends drinking and fishing, because at the time it was actually like a 5-minute walk from the house I was living in. So I could get drunk and fish and then just stagger home with, no harm, no foul. But anyway, so I'm telling him about this bridge. You go about 4 or 5 miles, you're going to come across this big bridge. Go across that bridge, and then you're going to go probably like 45 minutes. And then there's going to be an even bigger couple of bridges. You're going to go across those bridges, and then that'll put you in Ocean City. So if anyone listening knows what I'm talking about, I just sent this drunken idiot back to Baltimore, where he said he had come from. Okay, we have a term over here on the Eastern Shore of Maryland for people from Baltimore that are tourists. We call them either Torons, which is tourist/moron, or we call them Baltimoreans. Well, this Baltimorean got drunk and decided to drive across the Eastern Shore to go have fun at the beach. I sent him home. All right? Thanks, man. I really appreciate this. the dude actually gives me $5 for the directions and staggers out to his car. He was driving like a Dodge Colt. Gets in his car. There's another guy in there laying in the passenger seat who's either asleep or passed out at this point. The guy gets in the car, gets onto 50, turns right as I told him to, and heads up the highway. And Mark looks at me and says, "We should have called the cops and just held him here until they got here." I said, "You know what? You're absolutely right. And what I did probably wasn't a good idea. Probably was not a very good idea at all to send a drunk back out on the road." So for that, I felt really, really crappy. Because at the time, I was just so pissed off that some drunken tourist would come in here, because the tourists from Baltimore coming into that store were absolutely insufferable. They would, break stuff and steal stuff and act like idiots. I don't understand why, when people are tourists, they act like they've completely forgotten all social graces and have lost all vestiges of humanity and human-like behavior. But they turn into stupid, greedy, asinine animals when they're tourists. And I always swore to myself that I wouldn't be like that whenever I was a grown-up and had kids and went out doing tourist things. And to my credit, we behaved ourselves when we were tourists. And our kids behaved themselves when they were tourists. And we didn't act up, and we didn't act stupid, and we didn't break things, we didn't treat people badly, and we didn't, behave like morons in restaurants like they do nowadays. And like a lot of them did back then. But anyway, this guy leaves. Okay, so this is early afternoon. I'm scheduled to work until 8 o'clock. Mark is working like a 2 to close. He's got to close the store. So he had just come on shortly before that, and the manager, Carol Ann, I think, had just gotten off. She opened the store that morning. Well, let's say that's around 3:30, 4 o'clock, something like that. Well, as the day goes on, about 3.5 hours later, there's a ding at the door, and amidst the flow of customers that we've had all day, guess who's back? Yeah, the same dude. The same exact drunken idiot, still drunk, and he just managed to miracle his way back to this store. I look at Mark, he looks at me, and the look between us was Mark saying without saying it, "Dude, you're about to get your ass kicked." And my look to him was, "Dude, I'm about to get my ass kicked." Because I'm like, oh my God, this guy found his way back, and now he's going to take out his anger on me. I'm like, oh God. Well, he's sobered up a little bit. So he's not as bad as he was. He's not staggering like he was, thank God. I guess all the driving, he didn't have anything left in the car to drink. So eventually it wore off. He comes in, looks to the right again, looks to the left again like he did before. Mark says, "How you doing?" It's like, "Hey, man." And then he sees me. He's like, "Hey, you." Yeah. "Hey, come here." I'm like, okay, I might as well just take it like a man. So I walk over to him. It just so happened I was sweeping the floor again and had the broom in my hand. So I was like, okay, I can defend myself with the broom. I can push him back with the broom handle or something, and maybe I could swing it at him. I don't know. And he's like, "Man, I'm trying to get to Ocean City, and I stopped at this one place and got directions, and the guy sent me the wrong way." I was like, "What?" "Yeah, I was trying to go to Ocean City with my friend, and this dude gave me bad directions, and I ended up going the wrong way for like 2 hours." And Mark busts out laughing. "Are you serious?" He looks at me and I look at him, and we're just, imagine what would go through your mind if you had given someone bad directions and they came back to the place where you were working and confronted you but had forgotten it was you that gave them the bad directions. Okay, so this guy, clearly still a little drunk, but not like he was, thankfully profoundly forgetful. I guess he got the directions during the blackout, and only certain things got retained by his memory circuits. And he's like, I was like, are you sure you should be driving, man? He's like, oh, man, I'm a lot better than I was like a couple hours ago. I was really, really wasted, but I'm okay now. I'm really good now. I'm like, okay. And Mark and I look at each other, because we had discussed calling the police. And he's like, but I got to get out of here right now. So which way is it? Which way is it? And I mean, I can't restrain him. Mark's not going to try to restrain this guy. So I said, okay, tell you what you're going to do, buddy. When you come out of the parking lot here, you're going to make a right-hand turn. You're going to go 4 or 5 miles. There's a big bridge. Go across that. Go for about another 45 minutes. There's another bridge. Go across that. About another 5 minutes, there's a really big bridge. That'll take you into Ocean City. Yeah, that's right. I sent the guy the wrong way again because I said by the time he gets it figured out and comes back, we'll be closed. I'll be gone for the day, and he'll just have to suck it up. If he comes back a third time, I am not involved in this. But this time we did something else. After he pulled away, Mark called the state police. So was that a good thing? Was that a bad thing? Did I do a good thing? Did I do a bad thing? I think what I did was both good and bad. Probably more bad than good. But that is the level of disgust and disdain that I have for these people. And I've got other stories that you're going to hear from when I worked at this quick shop, because it was a very eventful 6 months. Because it was from February to late August, so it was almost all during tourist season. And man, I tell you what, people are nuts. And the guy left, got in his car, and I could tell when he got in the second time that, yeah, he was a little bit better, but probably still shouldn't have been driving. I just couldn't at the time think of a way to keep him there the second time. And to that, I do feel bad about it. But I sent him the wrong way a second time. He never came back. We never saw the guy again. Hopefully, when we called the state police, and there's one final footnote to this story. When we called the state police, hopefully, because we got his tag as he was headed out of the parking lot, hopefully they pulled him over. I never did find out whether or not they did. It's not like I called and asked or anything. But there's a footnote to this story. About a month later, Carol Ann, the manager, she was eventually replaced by the bad manager who treated me like crap, and that's when I left the place. Carol Ann comes up to Mark and me and says, I looked at the schedules from a month ago, and you guys were working on Saturday, the such and such. I said, okay. Did I break something? Did I do something wrong? Did I forget to stock something? She says, no, but somebody placed a long-distance call on the company phone, and we need you guys to pay for it. It was the call to the state police barracks in Easton, Maryland, because a call at the time on a landline from Cambridge to Easton from a 228 number, which is the local exchange, it's area code 410. From 410-228 to 410-822, which is Easton, was a long distance call, and it was like 15 cents a minute, and it was like a 2-minute call. So it was like a 30-cent phone call. But that's how that place was run, that they were so concerned about 30 cents that the employees had to reimburse the store for the 30-cent phone call. So I fished in my pocket and found the change and gave it to Carol Ann and said, here you go, sorry. And we told her the story of the drunk guy. And she said, and you guys sent him the wrong way twice? Mark says, I didn't do it, David did it. I was like, yeah, guilty. Yeah, I did it. She says, He never came back, did he? I said, not that night. She said, well, hopefully he found his way into a ditch somewhere or the cops pulled him over. But I can tell you that I did pay close attention to the local news, the TV stations. The TV stations on the Eastern Shore of Maryland that we got were channels 16 and 47 out of Salisbury, Maryland to the east. And they did not report any car crashes that involved fatalities or serious injury that particular day. So, to the best of my knowledge, information, and belief, I did not help contribute to that guy causing a DUI accident. But it's a funny story, but I still feel bad about it. So there's your anecdote for the day. But deep down, that idiot deserved it. He deserved to be sent home. And that was what I was trying to do, was send him home. So what do you think about that? Leave me a comment. Tell me what your thoughts are on whether or not I did the right thing, whether I should have not given directions at all, whether we should have tried to restrain him and call the cops, which, by the way, could have gotten us into some legal issues if we didn't do it properly. Plus, there was the friend in the car. What all happens? Could there have been a fight? I'm to this day, I'm still not a fighter. I'm an eater, not a fighter. So it could have. There's a number of different scenarios that could have resulted from all that. So, what are your thoughts on that? Drop me a line, and tell me what would you have done? What would you have done in that situation? Because I've often wondered, and to be honest, I've not asked a lot of people what they would have done, but when I've told the story to people, they've laughed and, said, wow, that's messed up. That's hilarious. But now that I'm thinking about it as an older and allegedly wiser person, maybe sending him back out on the road twice wasn't the best decision. But what other options did I have? Maybe, hey, buddy, wait here. I'm going to call a friend, and the friend is going to come, and he'll give you directions. Maybe he would have fallen for that, and we called the state police and had them send somebody. Maybe that would have worked. But it didn't dawn on me or Mark at the time. And I'm not blaming Mark, but he was the older and smarter guy in this exchange, and he didn't get involved. But whatever the case may be, I'm not blaming Mark. I'm not blaming Mark. His involvement is peripheral at most. It was 99.9% me. But I hope that guy found his way to wherever he was supposed to be. And hopefully it was the drunk tank. But that's the end of anecdotal evidence, and that brings us to the end of the podcast today. Please follow the podcast if you don't already do. Like I said, we're on Spotify. We started there. We're on Amazon now. We're on Audible. We're going to be on iHeart if we're not already. We're going to be on hopefully a couple of other podcast providers. We've already got the podcasts here linked to the Patreon page, which is in development. The Patreon page, for those of you that want to sponsor me in the future as I create more things, because it's not just going to be podcasts. I've got some novels that I'm working on. I've got some nerdy stuff that I'm working on for the role-playing crowd out there. I've got some stuff that I'm working on regarding military history. I've got some budding ideas for military history, either military history fiction or speculative military history, like alternate outcome military history stuff, a la people like Harry Turtledove, only it'll be written better, because Harry Turtledove, whenever you read any of his books, as it switches from one significant character to another, he tells you that character's entire story arc as he reintroduces them, and it got kind of annoying, and so I stopped reading Harry Turtledove. But there's a lot of stuff in the works on the Patreon page, and the address is patreon.com, patreon.com/WSP Dragons. That's where we're at. That's where we're going to be. I haven't set up the tiers for sponsorship yet, so everything right now is free. And right now, all it is a couple podcasts and a battle map that I created for tabletop fantasy role-playing games of an abandoned guard outpost along a river. I did it with Incarnate software a couple of years ago and liked it. It turned out fairly well. So I put that up there. Just, hey, use it. Go ahead, have fun with it. It's a story starter. It's an adventure seed. Use it. Like I said, we're also on Instagram now. at the WSPD Pod. Follow us there. We've got some pictures there coming soon. Twitter handle is the WSPD Podcast. Follow me there. YouTube is at the WSPD Podcast. We're going to have some stuff there. Right now it's just a couple of shorts promoting the beginning of the podcast, but we're going to be expanding. Get in from the ground floor, and you can say to your friends that when this becomes a major thing, you're going to be like, I was following Dave from the very beginning. And I've done that with a couple of people. As a matter of fact, we had some very limited interactions, and I can't claim that we were friends, but when he was just starting out, I interacted a good deal when I worked at the newspaper, probably 7 or 8 times on Twitter with Charlie Kirk. We had a couple of brief exchanges of tweets about different ideas and concepts, but it didn't escalate to the level where we had become acquaintances or anything. I'm just saying that I was a follower of Charlie Kirk, say, from the beginning, and God rest his soul. Hopefully we don't have to deal with any more political violence in this country. We've had enough of it. But again, that's another story for another podcast at another time. As it is right now, we're approaching the 1 hour mark. I want to wrap things up. Thank you guys for listening. Leave me a comment. I've got a poll going up. It's going to be, what would you have done with the drunk? And please vote in the poll. Spread the word. Tell people about the podcast. I'm an Eastern Shore, Maryland native, born and raised over here. Know the area like the back of my hand. Know tons of people. And have a lot of experiences in a lot of different fields, a lot of walks of life, a lot of information to share. And I love talking to people and sharing that information. So help me get the word out. Thanks again for listening. Have a great day. It's Wednesday right now. Have a great Wednesday. Looking forward to the weekend. Divisional playoffs in the NFL are coming up. We're going to be talking about that on Friday's podcast. I should have another podcast come out tomorrow. We're going to be working on that here shortly. And enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks so much for listening. Take care.